first 3 months,
For the first
they
3
can't
months.
drive after dark.
They can't drive after dark.
Right.
Okay. And then for the remainder of that time period, they can't drive after 10 p.m.
That's correct.
They always have to have a licensed driver in the car with them.
Exactly.
And anything else? Did I leave anything out?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
But let me just say that they may choose to have that learner's license for longer than 1 year. Okay, is a minimum of 1 year.
Okay.
And a minimum age of 15. We're seeing more teens that are not getting learner's licenses until they're a little bit older than that. And again, they're going to have to hold it a minimum of 1 year unless they turn 18.
Okay.
We have another stage in our driving.
There. That's why we're
And
here.
that's our intermediate stage, which is on the next screen. You'll see that at the intermediate stage, once they have taken a driving test and passed the driving test, they will be issued an operator's license, which has certain restrictions on it. Now, the restrictions for a 16-year-old vary from a 17-year-old. For a 16-year-old, they can drive between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. without that adult in the car. They can take the driving test at any license office, and we actually in Florida have tax collectors in many counties who now give the driving test. In some counties, it's still the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles as the sole location for taking the test.
And I'm going to go back a second. So on their first stage, you said they also had to take a course, did you say?
Yes,
And where do they go to take that course?
that course can be taken in a number of places. They can take it online. You could just simply Google the name of the course, which is the 4-hour Substance Abuse and Traffic Safety Laws course. Or they can take the course in person, and there are a number of providers that have classroom courses where they can go to take the class.
Now they've got their license. Now what?
Okay, well, once they pass the 17-year-old time period and they turn 18, now there are no driving restrictions. That is a full operator's license.
So now, Jillian, this is contradictory to what we used to have at age 16. I remember when I was a 16-year-old driver, at 16, I could drive alone. So the law now is there are times for 16-year-old and 17-year-olds that you, at 16 and 17, you're not free to roam anymore. It's up until you're 18. Is that correct?
Right, after that time period at night, which we just went over, 11 p.m. for 17 or 1 a.m., for 16, or 1 a.m. for 17, then you cannot be driving around with your friends in the car.
You're 18 years old, and now comes the scary part. So, and one of the dangers that we all face with our teens is impaired driving. So Danielle, tell us a little bit about what is impaired driving and what are the statistics like?
Well, just in speaking about teen drivers as a whole, I mean, these are our young people who have never had the experience of driving before, have never had this level of responsibility before, and we're asking them to learn these skills, have this awareness, understand the laws, plus maintain control of the vehicle while riding down the road. Just as an interesting statistic, driving is the most dangerous activity for anyone under the age of 25. So driving for this age group is actually more dangerous than the next 3 causes of death combined.
That's amazing. Say that again, because that's an amazing statistic.
Driving for anyone under 25 is more dangerous than the next 3 causes of death combined. So just thinking of this as a whole, your children are more in danger of being in a fatality by driving a car. So parents, all the more reason to educate them on skills and awareness every day. So when we're talking about impaired driving, number one, Florida law says it is illegal for anyone under the age of 21 to consume alcohol. Considering that's the law, you wouldn't think it would be an issue that anyone under the age of 21, such as our teen drivers, would be subject to impaired driving. However, we all are well aware that this is not the case. In fact, alcohol kills more children than any other illegal drugs combined. So
That's an amazing statistic, too.
yes, and unfortunately over 5,000 people under the age of 21 die as a result of underage drinking annually. When we talk about the definition of driving under the influence, driving under the influence means that you have proved impairment of normal faculties and that's proven by either an unlawful blood alcohol breath test or just the physical appearance of impairment. Now, driving under the influence doesn't necessarily mean car is in gear and driving down the road. Under the implied consent law, if you actually have possession, it's called physical control of the vehicle, you are responsible for your condition while behind the wheel. So another thing to note, okay, your teen makes the choice to consume some alcohol, and they get behind the wheel and they have enough judgment to say, I'm impaired and I need not drive any further. They pull off the side of the road and they choose to sleep it off. Okay, they're sitting on the side of the road, or they pulled into a parking lot, and so law enforcement comes by to check out the situation, what's going on. Officer, I'm just parked, I'm tired, what have you. Sir or ma'am, have you been drinking tonight? They may or may not be able to prove that just by the way they smell or what have you, but should it be proved later on that even though they're not moving, even though they are parked, if they are impaired by alcohol, they are again subject to driving under the influence. Now keep in mind that for teen drivers or any driver under 21, that BAC level is not 0.08, it is actually 0.02. Now, considering the law says you shouldn't consume alcohol, why would we have that level of 0.02? Understanding that alcohol is not necessarily what you drink. It can be found in medication or something that you're taking that would cause those levels to be elevated.
Like
However,
NyQuil or something like
correct,
that.
correct. Anything with an alcohol-based type medication or so forth. So that could cause a slightly elevated level of blood alcohol concentration. However, it would not necessarily induce impairment. So for teens, that level is 0.02 as compared to the law for anyone over 21, which is 0.08.
Mm-hmm.
So, say your teen chooses to make this decision, or actually anyone under 21 chooses to make this decision, and they are convicted with, or they're proven to have a blood alcohol concentration of over 0.2. They receive an automatic administrative suspension of their license for 6 months. In order to relinquish that suspension, they must make a court appearance and request to have that license restored to them. Now, if they are under an operator's license, they may have the opportunity to request a hardship license where they can travel to and from work or to and from school only. However, that is up to the judge or the administrative hearing officer at the time to determine whether that is a feasible solution for that particular offense. I wanted to point out that for our young drivers, for every fatal crash that involves young drivers, 1 out of 4 of those crashes also involved alcohol. So a quarter of the fatality rate as far as crashes go for young drivers, alcohol was involved. Again, further putting that statistic out there that impaired driving is a significant risk for young drivers. By taking physical control of the vehicle, you are subject to implied consent. By taking control of the vehicle, you are subject to an alcohol testing. Should you refuse, you are automatically suspended for 12 months. Now, we saw in the previous slide that if you blow over 0.02, it's an administrative suspension of 6 months. So by refusing, you're automatically adding an additional 6 months suspension to your license. Should you be so inebriated that you choose to refuse a second time, then that would be an additional suspension for 18 months. On average, $15,000 is the average cost for the DUI arrest. On our next slide, we talk about some additional consequences for things such as ignition interlock or extended suspensions and incarcerations. Ignition interlock is an actual device that is installed into your vehicle that prevents the ignition from turning on without you actually blowing into that breath test apparatus to regulate your breath test level at that point. So basically you're doing a sobriety test every time you get in the car. Now there's a cost involved with the installation of this equipment and also a monthly maintenance fee associated with this equipment. So should you be subject to ignition interlock, outside of the court fees, outside of the license reinstatement fees, outside of your attorney fees, you may have to pay this monthly ignition interlock fees. Should your offense be so heinous, the judge may agree to extend your suspension longer than the 12 or 18 months or 6 months as we described in the previous slides. Should you kill someone or injure someone significantly or cause significant property damage to an absorbent level, you could also be subject to incarceration.
And what about tobacco then?
Oh, as another thing to mention, the law for driving for our teens, law prevents tobacco use in anyone under the age of 18. Any driver convicted of possession of alcohol, possession of tobacco is subject to an automatic suspension for 6 months to a year, depending on how much or what have you.
So Julianne, can you just cover a little bit, basically what is distracted driving?
Distracted driving is anything that takes our awareness away from driving, and it can be visual, it can be manual, or it can be cognitive. For example, if you're reading a map or you're checking your GPS, those would be visual distractions while you're driving down the road. Manual ones are when you take your hands off of the wheel of the car. You've got two hands, they both should be on the wheel of the car at all times. What happens is when people are holding the steering wheel and then they let go with one hand to reach for something, that other arm starts to move up. When that other arm starts to move up on the steering wheel, then you are turning that car, and that's how cars crash into the trees off the side of the road, mailboxes, the car behind them. It's because they have only one hand to control that steering wheel while they're looking down to reach for something else. This happens every day. Now, the third type of distracted driving is cognitive, and that's where we don't have our mind on driving. And this also happens all the time. You can ask someone, did you notice something down the roadway when you were driving home today or to work today? No, I don't know whether that was there or not. Well, if they can't answer the question and they don't know if something was there, their mind wasn't on driving. And for teens, it's even more important because there's so much going on around their vehicle, and learning to scan and to recognize everything with your visual, then you've got to have your mind that's saying, okay, I see a half a block ahead, somebody is making a left turn. I need to do a certain thing with my car so that I stay safe. Another part about cognitive driving that I'd like to share is emotions. It is never a good idea for anyone to get behind the wheel of a car if they're angry, upset, overly excited, because in those cases, that's what's on the forefront of our mind, not driving. And we all know that teens are very emotional young people, and that's part of the excitement about teens. And I think as parents, we love to see them happy and joyful. However, we want to keep our teens safe, and that means if they are not feeling calm, be the person that they can call and say, Mom, I had a bad day, or I'm just overly excited about what's going on. Would you mind coming and picking me up? There were over 3,000 people that were killed in crashes that involved distracted driving, and that was in 2010 alone. And there were an estimated 416,000 additional people who were injured in crashes involving a distracted driver. And I want to call your attention to the third point on this slide, because texting and the use of mobile devices has become so widespread in our country that in June of 2011, more than 196 billion text messages were sent or received.
Julianne, that's such an excellent point as we talk about texting and driving, because that involves all three levels of distracted driving: your visual, your manual, and your cognitive. It's one of those kind of self-explanatory this is risk-taking in doing it, and it's not safe, and we really should not be doing it while driving. I mean, you are 23 times more likely to be involved in an accident, and that accident is 23 times more likely to be worse or fatal, or the injuries or the damages that are caused 23 times worse.
Tell us what else you know about distracted driving.
Well, in addition to, we talked about the conversations in the car. Our novice drivers, in their learner's permit and their operators, intermediate operators, they have to have an adult present. Okay, so that's one passenger in the car. That's an adult that's there to supervise their driving. Okay, so now you add a passenger. Say they're driving, they're 16, and they don't have to have that license, that adult license driver. They've got their best friend and sitting next to them, and they're talking about all the great things they're going to do tomorrow and all the wonderful things that are going on, and they're excited and they're engrossed in that conversation. Well, as teens, as we talked about earlier, they are so emotionally charged, which causes that additional cognitive distraction. Statistics show that teen driving with 2 or more teen passengers increases the chance of crash by 5 times. So you are 5 times more likely to crash by every teen passenger you have. So if you have teens, if you have one buddy riding with you, you are automatically 5 times more likely to get in a crash. And then that number increases exponentially as you add additional buddies. So basically, a clown car full of teens is a recipe for disaster.
So Ellen, now as a parent of teens, tell us what you're going through.
Well, I am a parent of teens. That's my most important job. I also work at the Department of Children and Families in substance abuse prevention. So I try to bring some of those messages home to my teens. I have a 16-year-old son who's a relatively new driver, and then an 18-year-old daughter who is a freshman in college. So we've been through all of the trials and tribulations of having teen drivers. We've had the fender benders, we've had the speeding tickets, and we've had also a completely totaled car. So I have been through the ups and downs of that. And we have a big challenge on our hands in the United States. We give our kids cars when they're younger than in all other countries. 16 is a very young age, and I was surprised to learn that 16-year-olds are 3 times more likely to have an accident than other age groups. So we know that in the amount of insurance we pay, but seeing that
and
statistic
research shows is that those first 2 or 3 months after your license, that's when you're the most likely to have a crash.
Yes, absolutely. And really, they're not experienced until they have well over 1,000 miles of driving experience, and that takes a long time.
And I also find that with both of my children, but maybe more my son, they do feel invincible. They are teenagers.
It's never going to happen to me.
They don't understand the consequences and risks. And I also heard from them that, accidents are no big deal. Everybody has them. Mm-hmm. So they're desensitized. Because of the statistics that we shared, teens do have a lot of accidents. So they regard them as maybe not a big deal. So they really don't understand consequences very well, from my own experience, what I've been able to find. But there are things that parents can do. I mean, we've learned today about the laws in Florida, which I think are very solid and give parents the tools that they need to work with their teen drivers. We are driving role models that we have to be aware, as in all of our behaviors, that they have been observing us drive for many, many years. So how we behave in the car is important. Are we driving distracted? Are we using our cell phones? Are we speeding? So we really have to take some responsibility in that arena.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, Ellen, because when I go out and do presentations at my SAD chapters across the state, middle and high school, the number one thing I hear from the audience members, these teens, is that why should I give up my texting and driving? Why should I wear my seatbelt? Why should I practice good safe driving skills when mom or dad or the older sibling are not?
And maybe a way to have that conversation is to make a driving contract with your teen, and we've provided you a link to just one of many. This one is from the Center for Disease Control, and I found it particularly good in terms of comprehensive, but perhaps that contract could be used as a conversation, that if I'm having my teen sign that they shouldn't be texting, then maybe they would feel the opportunity to ask, well, why do you get to text if I'm not being allowed to text? So that's one of the practical things that I think that we can encourage parents to do, and I think it's very powerful. I wish that I had done it with my teens I just wasn't aware of it. So this kind of webinar would have helped me. And then lastly, I just want to remind people that, the holidays are upon us, parties are upon us, and that remember in Florida, as we said earlier on this webinar, that we have a zero tolerance for underage drinking and driving law. So please do not serve your teen a glass of champagne on New Year's Eve, and particularly if she's going out to a party afterwards. And let's collectively work as parents to have a safe holiday season. And parents, you play your part in making sure that your child is safe and our communities are safe.
I thank you, ladies, so much for being here and for being part of this panel discussion. All of us, we've shared our email addresses with you on the slide presentation, so if after this webinar is concluded you would like to ask us individually some questions, we're happy to do that.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to all the panelists. I think it's just wonderful information. None of us should be on the road driving because we're all stressed out, we're all distracted, we're not paying attention, trying to focus. The cell phone has certainly made us all distracted. We're distracted in meetings. We have a lot of difficulty being present.